And you join me at the beginning of a busy week for Andy Burnham as he moves from short-term to long-term. We already this morning on Times Radio Breakfast and Beyond have been discussing the issue of young people who are not being paid particularly well when it comes to work, but also those who are being paid even more than those on the minimum wage to stay at home and claim sickness benefits. There's a question as to how Andy Burnham will address getting young people back into work. We expect that will be announced tomorrow. On Wednesday, Andy Burnham's going to be talking about social care. There's a defence-related announcement pencilled in for Thursday as well. We expect the Prime Minister to be involved in all of these. And you'll have read over the weekend and heard on Times Radio over the weekend as well that Andy Burnham's expected to make an announcement on devolution come Friday. Of course, the timeline can slip in all of these things, but these are the things to be listening out for on Times Radio through the course of this week. As part of that devolution package, that may include plans to let mayors keep a share of income tax revenues in their areas. Andy Burnham says all of this is about shifting power out of Whitehall and boosting growth. But questions remain, of course, over whether devolution will benefit all parts of the United Kingdom equally. Specifically, I suppose, in a Burnham context, whether that will benefit all parts of England equally. We can speak to Helen Thompson, Professor of Political Economy at Cambridge University, who you may have caught in the Sunday Times. You can still read her piece online at thetimes.com. Good morning, Helen.
Good morning, Calum.
It's great to speak to you about this. I'm quite intrigued by what Andy Burnham's devolution will and indeed won't mean. Is there just a default certainty, I suppose, that with devolution some parts of England are going to benefit more than others and some parts will be left behind?
Well, the framework that Andy Burnham has inherited from Keir Starmer is an English Devolution Act that says that all of England has to be covered by a strategic authority of some kind. Now, the thing is that strategic authorities already exist in parts of England, some at higher levels than others. The highest level is the kind that exists in Manchester and Liverpool. But significant swathes of southern England are not covered by any strategic authority at all. And what the bill that Keir Starmer passed was supposed to do was to encourage them all to, in the government's mind, sort themselves out to get one. But actually, that's much easier said than done. So if you start devolving powers at the moment to mayors, you can't do that in significant parts of England because that they don't exist.
Yes. So there's a sort of stepping stone part to this where whatever his announcements are, he's going to have to roadmap his way to devolving the powers he wants to.
Absolutely, is that you can't devolve powers where there is no place to devolve them to.
Yeah.
And at the moment that is the case. And even if you just take the places that do have a strategic authority and a mayor, then they don't have the same levels of powers. So is he, for example, going to give income tax to the second tier authorities as opposed to the top tier authorities like Manchester, Liverpool, London?
In terms of what this means for power structures in England, to what extent does this cut out MPs and that level of representation? To what extent does this empower local councils or not? I'm trying to understand where power will move and whether power is really going to be taken away from Whitehall to the detriment of MPs and that level of representation. Do they almost become superfluous if it's the mayor that's spending the money in your area?
Yeah, I don't think that will be the case, though obviously it will depend upon the detail of what's being devolved. I think that the more general question, if you like, is if these strategic authorities, whatever tier that they're at, are all really centred around cities. Well, what does that mean for more rural areas and the areas between the urban and the rural? Because effectively what you're doing is like creating strategic authorities with urban centres that are then where the rural part of under the strategic authority is quite likely to get outvoted. So they might still be represented in their constituency level at Westminster, but if a significant number of decisions are being made at the strategic authority level, then their representation is going to count less.
To what extent is there a concern about how things like care boards, police forces, local authorities, often geographical boundaries are actually quite mismatched when it comes to sort of line all these things up? So how can a devolution revolution succeed if the outline of an area that the power is being exerted over is different depending on which bit of public service you're dealing with?
I think that this is a really important point, Callum. If you take Milton Keynes as an example, which I used in the piece, and I know something about because my parents live there, is that it is one of these areas that isn't covered by a strategic authority. It went into a bid for one with Bedford and Luton because that sort of maps on to the way in which healthcare works in that part of England. But then the bid was rejected because it didn't include Northamptonshire, which isn't part of the health arrangements, but has got nowhere else to go under the present proposals for English devolution, as things stand anyway. So actually creating strategic authorities that match the existing provision of public services is actually also going to be quite tricky.
What about when it comes to the nations of the United Kingdom? I'm thinking really of Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland too, but Scotland sits at the top of that table, I suppose, when it comes to devolved powers over its nation and what has come to the Parliament at Holyrood, and similarly the Welsh Senedd and the Stormont Assembly in Belfast as well. Is there any consideration in all of this, Helen, for what a decentralisation around England means for the devolved parliaments of the United Kingdom too? And I'm thinking, of course, if this is a sort of fiscal/economic revolution, then I don't imagine it will be long before First Minister John Swinney, for example, is calling for more powers over economics, tax, and the fiscal authority that he currently has, extending that in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I think that there's a central muddle here, Callum, in the whole thing, because the way in which Andy Burnham is presenting devolution and presenting Number 10 North, which is in his mind very much tied to the devolution project that he has in mind, is that this is a United Kingdom level move.
Yeah.
But as you said, then there's already national parliaments in Belfast, Cardiff and Edinburgh, and there's absolutely no way that these parliaments are going to accept effectively Westminster, because that's what it means in practice, usurping their authority to have some coordinating hub of devolution in Manchester. So either the UK-wide rhetoric is just going to fall away because there's no support outside England and Westminster for it, and if that's the case, then what we're left with is Number 10 North really working as devolution for England, but that takes us back into the problem that there is no steady, consistent basis for devolution to strategic authorities in England.
I like what you're referring to it as a muddle there, Helen, which I think does feel appropriate. I wonder if you will be able to untangle this in a speech this week for us. From what we know of Andy Burnham and his devolution ambitions, how can he do this? How can he do that? He's already opened Number 10 North brackets of England. It seems like there's going to be kind of, frequent meetings there, and he says it's going to be the sort of central hub for devolving powers around the rest of England. Is that the correct first step to open this outpost?
Well, I think it would have been better if the outpost is supposed to have a central function of coordinating devolution, to use his language, to resolve first the question of whether there is going to be or supposed to be devolution within Scotland and Wales in the same way, something must be said about which the Westminster government simply does not have authority, and then what to do about the unevenness of devolution to the city level or the greater city level, however one wants to think about it, in England. I think I'm right in saying that under the existing legislation there is until 2029 to sort out strategic authorities for those places that don't have them. But if we're going to see quick transfers of power, then that's too late. So you would think if the Number 10 North is supposed as its central function to have a coordinating role over devolution, that you have to sort devolution out first in England, and then you have to work out whether there is any support whatsoever in Scotland, Wales, leaving Northern Ireland out of it for the moment, for devolution within Scotland and Wales down to the city level. And there's no real evidence that there is.
Yeah. Helen, it's fascinating. Thank you very much. Thanks for speaking to us.
Pleasure, Calum.
Thanks very much. That's Helen Thompson, Professor of Political Economy at Cambridge University, who was writing in the Sunday Times this weekend, and you can still read that if you go to thetimes.com with your digital subscription. Then go and get stuck in, as I did, over the weekend and thoroughly enjoyed it.